Welcome to the learning module on physical activity. My name is Pam Elsky-Leonetti, and I have been a physical therapist at Fry Regional Medical Center for 15 years. Some of the things we're going to learn about today are going to include identifying ways to modify everyday tasks to promote physical activity, identifying the difference between pain and soreness following exercise, identifying the appropriate exercise response, as well as identifying community resources or activity alternatives. Let's start with some ways to be active. I want you to think about what challenges have you experienced that prevent you from being active every day? What obstacles do you face? Next, I want you to think of what has worked well for you. This may be something that's worked well in the past or what's worked well for someone else. Some of the challenges we face most recently can include things such as COVID. With COVID, this has encouraged a more sedentary lifestyle over the past 2 years, as well as created stress, anxiety amongst numerous individuals, which ultimately has taken a toll on our mental health and well-being. One of the things we have also seen with individuals over the past few years is increased alcohol intake in numerous people. Another challenge most commonly faced amongst folks is work-life balance. Americans tend to work longer hours now than ever before. We also carry more stress upon ourselves, which ultimately helps us resort to convenience foods, which tend to be calorie dense and nutrient deficient. There's also a less focus on health and wellness. Overall, we're tired. A lot of folks, when they come home from work, don't have the energy or the time necessarily to engage in prolonged physical activity. This is where some of what you'll learn here comes into play of finding ways to incorporate it into your routine. So it may not be a 1-hour gym trip. It may be multiple 5 to 10 minute things throughout the course of your day. So where to start? This is often challenging for folks because they're not sure where to start. So here's a few little guidelines I'd like to highlight. You don't have to have equipment. That is a misnomer that you have to have arm weights or cuff weights or an elliptical or a Peloton. You don't have to have equipment to be active. You don't have to go to a gym to be active. That's another thing that takes time to go to a gym. There are lots of home workout options that are just as good. You should and do need to stretch or warm up before exercising, which this is going to ultimately prevent injury. And you also need to be kind to yourself. If you are someone that is starting to increase your physical activity or starting to engage in physical activity and you've not in the past, be kind to yourself. Don't judge yourself or compare to other people. If you're at a walking track and there's someone that runs an 8-minute mile, if you have not ran in years, you are not going to run an 8-minute mile, and that's okay. That's something that can deter us from engaging in physical activity is humans tend to judge themselves harshly. So I urge you to always be kind to yourself as you're beginning this new journey. So some ways to be active every day to start with. So find the right task. What are your interests? As I said before, you don't have to have a gym and you don't have to have fancy equipment in order to be active. Maybe you really enjoy going to the lake. Maybe swimming is something you like. Maybe you like to hike. Maybe you just want to walk through your neighborhood. Maybe you want to garden more. So find something that's right for you and your interest. That's going to increase compliance and give you a better chance of making it a habit and a routine. Determine if you like solo or group activities. What's your preference? Some folks tend to do better to have someone that they do things with because that helps them be accountable. Some people shy away from group activities and would much rather be solo, and that's okay, but find what works for you. Also, feel free to venture out and look for some community resources. Your town or community may have walking trails, greenways, there may be support groups, classes. Venture out and try new things to see what works for you. So here's a few recommendations of ways to be active every day. So as I mentioned before, work-life balance and just time in general can be a contributing factor to less physical activity than is ideal. These are some things that you can just do to bump your physical activity in small increments. Park farther away from a store entrance. Take the stairs instead of the elevators. Walk during commercial breaks when watching television. Use a standing desk if available if working in an office. Walk down additional aisles at the store. Mow the yard, gardening, play sports with your kids or grandchildren. Go to a museum and walk. Turn on some music and dance. So these are things that don't take a lot of time. They don't take money like a gym membership, that should you choose to do so could be really beneficial in just increasing your general activity tolerance. In the South, I feel like the weather is always a contributing factor. That's one of the reasons some of the ways to be active every day I've chosen are buildings that are air conditioned. When you get into stifling heat, it can become more challenging to do some of the things outdoors. You know, if it's 98 degrees, trying to mow your yard is a fairly miserable experience. So that's not something that you're enjoying being active. That's something you're trying to just get through and get it over with. So think of places, mall walking. That's a really good opportunity to get some walking in and be in an air-conditioned building that's not going to cause you to be dehydrated and potentially have a problem. Make it routine. Whatever you're doing, don't give up. Most research now says it takes 66 days of performing something for it to become a habit. So if you are really good for a week or two and stop, it's not a habit. Keep going in whatever way you need to make it a habit to kind of promote your own health. So some other things that are kind of accompaniments to being active are technology driven. So fitness trackers. Fitness trackers are a really cool way to have a watch, but also get information and data about what your activity level is throughout the day. These fitness trackers vary greatly in pricing. You can get a basic pedometer that's just going to count steps. You can get a Fitbit, a Garmin, an Apple Watch. There's one called Wise. The sky is definitely the limit with options for fitness trackers. Some of these trackers will actually give you sleep scores, heart rates. They can determine if you're cycling, walking, biking, on a treadmill. They are really, really helpful in you knowing exactly how much you're doing. And they're giving you measurable numbers, which actually have value of today I walked 5,000 steps. Tomorrow I want to walk more. I'm going to try to do 6. Trying to shoot for something that, allows you to track. And they also can link to a smartphone if you have one, where you can actually track the data over time, which is really helpful. Some of them allow you to log water, so it's definitely a cool thing to help you keep track of how active you are. Some of the fitness apps also are pretty helpful with this. So Google Fit tends to come on a lot of Android phones. MyFitnessPal, Glow, Sworkit, Fujicate. So these are varying in price. Some are free, some are not. Just depends upon what you're looking for. Just, again, another thing that you can help track what your activity level is. There are also apps that may have been alluded to before that can help you keep track of how many calories you're consuming. So branch out and give some of the tech a try to kind of help you stay on your path. If you're old school, you're scared of tech, there is nothing wrong with a notebook or a pad and a pen. You can write stuff down very easily to track. I did 5 laps. I did 6 laps. I did, 10 flights of stairs. That's also pretty helpful. Other options are going to be Instagram, just for some quick videos of exercises and activities. There's lots of options of people to follow. Podcasts are another thing. These can be on 1,000,001 different topics. Some people like to listen to a podcast while they walk. Some people like to do books on tape. These are things that let you, distract you from what you're doing. They also can kind of give you encouragement. My caution on anything Instagram, podcast, etc., is to be leery of what you're listening to or what you're doing as far as some of the exercises, because anyone can have an Instagram, anyone can have a podcast. So you just want to make sure that you are buyer beware with these options, and choosing things that are encouraging and not detrimental to your journey of physical activity. So exercise considerations, I'd like to caution everybody to please make sure you have appropriate physician clearance prior to engaging in any form of exercise that is new, that you're kind of venturing out to. Do not try to run a marathon if you have not run in years. It is not a good idea. It will probably not go well. So again, please consult your physician with questions regarding that. Remember, there are different types of activities as well. So there's stretching, strengthening, and cardiovascular, just to be pretty generic there. So remember, we're always going to stretch and warm up. And then we want to decide if we're looking to gain muscle mass or are we looking to get activity tolerance. And it's really nice to find activities that do a little bit of both. So I've given you a sample of an American Heart Association walking program. So walking is one of the easiest things to incorporate into your routine. Again, it requires no equipment, no gym membership. All you need is your body and a place to do it. You could even do this in a small apartment where you walk back and forth across the length of the apartment. So you guys are more than welcome to kind of take a look at that. We can send Becky Steele will have copies of that as well if anybody's interested, or you can go online and just look up American Heart Association walking program. So exercises for any time. I'm going to highlight a few exercises just that you can do anywhere, anytime. So how to find the time to do them. So we mentioned this before. Commercial breaks of a television show are a fantastic time to do something. Seated in a chair at home or work, before you get out of bed, or before you go to sleep. So again, make it part of your routine. If it's something you're waiting and pushing off, it's going to be hard once the day is gone to go back and do these in the manner in which you would like. Something is better than nothing. So I firmly believe we all have to start somewhere, and something is better than nothing at all when it comes to physical activity. So exercises that we're going to start with first, these are just heel raises 3 ways. So you'll note seated, just heels up and down. Standing, again, heels up and down. With standing, I would recommend holding on to a kitchen countertop. If you have balance issues, please do not do this exercise in standing. And then laying down. This is a great one in the morning when you get up or before you go to bed at night, just to get the blood pumping a little bit. Gets all the little muscles in the foot and ankle that help us with balance. That side. By side. Next one is knee extension. So this is just going to be a kick. So you're seated, you're going to slowly kick up and bring your leg down. Again, don't need anything really fancy to do it. You just need the weight of your leg. Our next exercise is going to be a hamstring curl. So with this, we're seated, we bend the knee, and we bring it back. So this gets the muscle on the back of the thigh. And then also in standing. Again, we're holding on to the kitchen counter for any standing exercises for added stability. Knee to chest. This is, again, laying down on the bed. We just bring that knee up, stretch a little bit, and put it down. And in standing, it's basically a march. So again, we can hold on to the kitchen counter or a chair back, and we can march. Next one is going to be a hip flexion knee extension. So this is also called a straight leg raise. We raise the leg up, we slowly lower it down. With these exercises, again, if you have any pain, stop. We will go over the difference between pain versus stretch or injury. So just be mindful of that. If you can only raise the leg a few inches, that's fine. Do your few inches. Remember, something is better than nothing at all. Step up, step down. If you have a step in the house, we step up, we step down. Some of us may remember when step aerobics were a trend. This is a really nice one just because it gets power and control of the legs. Next exercise, all you need is yourself and a chair. Yep. So we're going to stand up nice and slow, and then we're going to sit down. And we're going to stand up and sit down. This one, again, you can do during commercial breaks of a television. It's really good for the hips and glutes and the core muscles as well. So exercise response. You may experience an increase in blood pressure and heart rate, an increased respiratory rate, or potential soreness after exercise. If you experience any unexpected or unexplained chest pains, stop. That's a call 911 situation if you're having anything that is related to chest pain. Lightheadedness or dizziness, you should find somewhere to sit down and stop. And feeling of passing out, you should also find somewhere to sit down. People can very easily become dehydrated, so it's very important to make sure that you're adequately hydrated with water when you are working out, just to make sure you're not experiencing some negative effects of physical activity due to being dehydrated. So soreness versus pain. It's important to remember if you've not exercised in a while, you may have some muscle soreness. So muscle soreness is going to feel as if it's tender when touching muscles, tired or burning when exercising. And it's typically going to occur anywhere from 24 to 72 hours after activity. It's going to last maybe 2 to 3 days, and it's going to be in the muscles. Now, the things that will help this improve will be stretching following movement and just moving in general. General muscle soreness will get worse with sitting still. If you are experiencing pain or injury, that is going to become worse with continued activity. So if I'm running and I get pain and it's getting worse, I've then possibly injured myself. That's when we're going to stop and we're going to rest and ice and hope that it goes away within 24 hours. And if it lasts more than a week or two, we're going to consult the physician. So really just being mindful of muscle soreness, that you worked and you did a lot of good stuff, versus pain where you have overdone it and hurt yourself. It's very important to listen to your body when we're doing any activities. So some of you may not feel comfortable with resuming physical activity or beginning a physical activity program. So there are situations where it may be appropriate to speak to your physician regarding a physical therapy or occupational therapy referral. If you have any difficulty with strength, balance, coordination, overall physical function, including but not limited to getting out of bed, walking, going up and down steps, it may be appropriate to consult your physician for physical therapy. If you have issues with bathing, dressing, toileting, arm and hand strength, or IADLs, which include shopping, driving, working, etc., occupational therapy may be an appropriate physician referral to obtain. These are things that it's very important to keep an open line of communication with your primary care physician as well as your other doctors to be able to obtain these referral sources if needed to help you maximize your quality of life and physical function. So beyond physician referrals, we want to briefly touch on community resources, which we've mentioned before. So be adventurous. Look for things in the community. There may be city parks, recreation centers, health and fitness centers, hiking and biking trails, school walking tracks, greenways, exercise classes, sports leagues or clubs, yoga, Zumba, dancing, pickleball, senior games, support groups. I did this course and had a woman who had taken up belly dancing, and she said it was an excellent way to get in her physical activity and have some fun. So explore what's available to you. Some of these venues may have more opportunities for physical activity that you may be unaware of. The internet gives us so much knowledge, so it's something to search and see what's available. So let's get active. So number one, I want everyone to find out what's right for you. Practice safety with activity. Remember those signs of, if you have chest pain, we're going to stop. If you're lightheaded, we're going to stop. If you get a little muscle soreness, we're going to keep it up because it's 66 days to make it a habit. Utilize those fitness accessories, apps, fitness trackers, checklists, anything you feel may help you succeed in this journey to become more physically active and overall healthy. And as we spoke before, explore your community, classes, walking trails, fitness centers. Really, the sky's the limit with finding a physical activity that's going to work for you, that's going to allow you to be happier and healthier.
I am Dr. Joan Brugman from FryCare Behavioral Health. I may have done your psychological evaluation, and I know you've heard me speak in the information session, so you'll be familiar with some of this material. Before we start, let me say, as I always do, that my delivery style and the content I'm about to go over is in no way intended to be discouraging or frightening. But I'm going to tell you the truth, because even though you really are standing at the threshold of the rest of your life, and it can and it should be thrilling because it's so full of potential for you to regain your health and regain your peace with yourself and enjoy living your best life. But it's not easy. And nothing worth having ever is. So the purpose of this class is to reinforce your commitment to the entire process so you can have a safe and successful outcome. And I do mean both safe and successful. When I work with folks who've had weight loss surgery and they haven't succeeded, they admit that the psychological part was much harder than the medical part. In fact, many people say they wish they'd had more preparation than they did, or that they took it more seriously. So I'm going to do a fairly deep dive and go over all of the relevant aspects, and fair warning, it is a lot. So as you're listening to this, I strongly encourage you to really engage. Maybe take notes. Think about how it all applies to you. Don't just let it wash over you or let it play in the background while you're doing something else. This really is your physical and psychological well-being we're talking about here. 3 main factors to consider: behavioral, cognitive, and emotional. And I'm going to go over each one of those separately. They all 3 have to be taken into account. It's not just the behaviors, because any one of these 3 things can completely sabotage the power of weight loss surgery to help you change your life. And we'll start with the behavioral part. And fair warning, 67% of people gain back a significant amount of weight in the first 5 years. I'm sure you know what to do. Every one of the people in that 67% knew what to do too. They said they were ready. They knew what to do when it was smooth sailing. But they did not know what to do when the seas got rough. And if you're on planet Earth, the tide will turn and the seas will get rough. You have to be prepared for difficulty. And if, oh yeah, I know, we'll have to come up with a plan for that, or we'll have to do something, or we'll get through it, if that's your plan, without an actual plan of what you can and will really do, it's the same thing as saying, my plan is to fail at this. And another fair warning, 60% of people who can't stay on track, but just for the first 5 years, let alone the rest of your life, end up with such bad medical complications that they, in the long run, that they end up admitted to a hospital. Seriously. So, as I said, I know you know what to do. These are what another bariatric psychologist named Connie Stapleton calls the gotta do-ums. They're these 6 main things. Things that are related to food. What you're eating, how much you're eating, when you're eating, how you're eating, meaning chewing it and so forth, and why you're eating. Overall, plan your meals and follow the plan. But you also have to make consistently healthy choices about what you're eating. Now, note, there are no forbidden foods, but there have to be some strictly limited foods. And by that, I mean both in quantity and frequency. If you are going into this thinking you can eat whatever you want, just not much of it, you're going to have problems sustaining your weight loss. Because gradually that new little stomach stretches and it can take in more. And the reality is that human behavior drifts back to old habits. So if you plan on having unhealthy food frequently, even if you think it'll only be a little bit, really, you might want to think twice about whether you should go forward, because you don't want to be in the 60% who don't stay on track. You also have to control how much. So you've got to be focusing on portion control. If that means small plates and small utensils, do it. If it means measuring and weighing, do it. But you have to be in control. We would like people to be able to just listen to their body, but that, frankly, doesn't always work. So my recommendation is have some guardrails to help protect you if you get outside of your lane there. When you're eating is another thing. I'm sure Becky talked about eating on a schedule, but another aspect is you've got to eat breakfast. Not just if you're hungry, not just if you're tired, not just if you feel well. You need to do this every day. If you want your metabolism to start working correctly, then you have to operate that machine correctly. And if you don't put fuel in the machine, it's not going to operate correctly. Surges of energy, of fuel, throw off your blood sugar, and that affects the way your body processes and stores food energy, and therefore fat. How you're eating it is about chewing, and why you are eating. How you're eating it is about chewing thoroughly, eating slowly and mindfully so that you can listen to your body, and why you are eating goes to the issue of whether it's a scheduled meal or it's impulsive eating or emotional eating, and we're going to talk more about that later. Obviously, you've got to take your vitamins every single day, even if the supply chain breaks down, which happened to me during the pandemic. You have to find another way to get the nutrients that are in those vitamins, even if you have to patch it together with other products. Even if you can't afford them, even if you are busy, even if you are forgetful, you still have to take those vitamins every day. You've got to drink water, a lot of water. A lot of water, like half a gallon of water every day. And I don't mean sipping it all day. Sipping brings in extra air, just like drinking through a straw does. People who sip don't get in a half a gallon of water a day. Just drink it, folks. You don't have to be afraid of drinking water. Don't guzzle it and gulp it, or chug it. Not that, but don't suck in a bunch of air with a little sip through the day. That does not work. The next thing is exercise. Now, our PT has put together a great class for you, and you'll note that she makes exercise reachable and sustainable for everyone. That's everyone right now, not once you lose your weight, now. No matter how much you weigh, no matter if you have pain, no matter if you can afford exercise equipment or gym membership, she has created a program that there really are no excuses. People who exercise regularly are more likely to have a safe and successful outcome with weight loss surgery, period. You have to find a way, and you absolutely can. You've also so those are the 4 main things everybody knows about, but these last 2 are absolutely critical. You've got to manage stress. Stress impacts the way your stomach and your intestine work, and that affects eating behavior. And you have got to work on committing to taking care of yourself. That's a behavior, but it's obviously a cognitive and emotional process as well. If you've got that commitment, you're much more likely to keep doing all of the above forever, and therefore being able to be happy and to be successful and safe. And part of that commitment to self, we strongly also recommend engaging in a healthy, and you've got to make sure that you have healthy bariatric informed support people. It can't just be a family member who is in your corner, they're rooting for you. They have to understand what is required here. I'm hoping that they're listening to this program with you right now. And if they're not, please share it with them later so they know exactly how tough this is going to be for you. And talk to them about what kind of support you personally need them to give you. I encourage you to have a strong bariatric informed support outside of your family as well. People that you don't have an emotional attachment to, who can just tell you how it is, because they know what you're supposed to be doing, and they don't have to worry about hurting your feelings if they've got to give you some tough love. Lastly, I strongly encourage you to keep a journal to your adherence to all 6 of these things. So the next thing is so that's the behavioral part. The next thing is the cognitive part. This refers to your thoughts, your beliefs, your values and priorities, your overall mindset. Your mindset is the vehicle of your life. You have got to drive it. You've got to know where you're going, and you've got to be really clear what the goal is. The goal is not the number on the scale. It's having a healthy life. Now, no, I'm not talking about settling for sweet lemons here. Well, I only lost 10 pounds, but that's better than I've done before. That's not what I mean. I needed to lose 300 pounds and I only lost 50. Well, that's better than nothing. That's not what I'm talking about. But I am saying do not get fixated on the scale. The number on the scale is a side effect of a healthy lifestyle. And let's face it, there are plenty of really miserable, very skinny people. The next piece I would suggest is to have an ownership mentality, meaning this whole bariatric lifestyle, your new life is yours. You decided to do this. You decided to take on a new life. You need to do it. Don't give the responsibility to anyone or anything else. Do not be saying things like, the surgery is going to keep me from eating too much, or the surgery is going to stop me from eating too much sugar, or it's going to stop me from eating the wrong things. You are going to do those things. The surgeons are not going to cut your hands off. You can put anything in your mouth you want, and believe me, people do. The surgery cannot stop you from making bad decisions. Don't be blaming other people or other circumstances, like, well, my appetite is just out of control, or I just can't withstand the cravings, or my family was eating unhealthy things around me and I just couldn't resist. Your appetite may well go away for a while, but I'm telling you, it's going to come back. And when it comes back, it usually comes back hangry, because you have cut off the food supply for about 1.5 years, and it figures it's got ground to make up for. So you have to be prepared for that. If you say, I can only stay on track as long as I don't have an appetite, again, folks, really, you ought to reconsider. It also means you've got to change your negative thoughts. No, it also means not going rogue. So, for example, well, I know they said that you should drink 64 ounces of water a day, but that just doesn't work for me, so I don't follow that rule. Or my bones are already healthy. I don't need to worry about the effect of soda on my bones. I don't think that's going to bother me. Or I know they said to eat lean, healthy protein, but I just don't like that kind of food. So I'm just doing what works for me. If those are your thought patterns, you are in for a lot of disappointment. The third thing is that you've really got to work on changing your negative thoughts and your negative self-talk. So watch out for having thoughts like these. Healthy food tastes bad, or healthy food is bland, or a meme that I saw on the internet. Healthy food is food that makes you feel sad. If you're thinking things like that, you have a problem. If you're thinking things like, I hate exercise, or I can't exercise, or I'm failing if I haven't lost very much weight yet, or I'm not losing weight very quickly, so this isn't working, or I'm lumpy, bumpy, saggy, or uneven, therefore I still hate my body, so I may as well just give up on this. I'm never going to end up looking like Britney Spears or somebody else, J-Lo. So I may as well give up. If you catch yourself having any of those thoughts, you should be prepared with sort of like a pre-recorded or pre-planned response. Push back against any of those thought processes. Have a plan. I really encourage you to make a list of responses to those kinds of thoughts and you could do it as a list, or you could write yourself a letter right now to address those kinds of cognitive distortions. Okay, the next part we're going to go over is the emotional part. And this includes some really difficult topics, including how you feel about or your relationship with yourself, how you feel about your body, food, and stress. You really need to be very honest with yourself about these 4 things because they can undermine all of your best intentions and your willpower. So we're going to look at them one by one. Due to some time limits, we're not going to get into too much of a deep dive on these things, but I'm just going to say if something here really hits a nerve, consider reaching out for some professional support because these things really are hard. So we'll start with your relationship with yourself. When you think about this, your relationship with yourself, how do you feel? Do you feel awkward? Do you feel guilty or embarrassed to be putting yourself and your own needs first? Does it feel selfish? Were you taught or told that it was selfish and that being selfish is a bad thing? Let me tell you, folks, self-care is not selfish. Self-care is not any more selfish than breathing or sleeping or surviving. You can't survive if you don't take care of yourself. And if you don't survive, you're not going to be around to take care of anybody else anyway. So you've really got to come to terms with the reality that you have to take care of yourself. And that might mean that you need to ask for help. Or you might need to ask other people to change their behavior. You might need to say no or not right now to other people who need you, people who you've always said yes to before. But remember, this is about lifestyle change. To do this, you really need a commitment to really taking care of yourself. And I mean the right way, not just getting on an operating table and getting a small stomach, but to taking care of your whole self. Now, I know you can't just abandon your caregiving responsibilities to other people, but at no point can you allow those responsibilities to others to prevent you from your responsibility to yourself. And I don't mean saying, oh yeah, I know, I will. Right after I take care of all these other people who need me, then I'll take care of myself. Because let's face it, when you've put your needs behind everyone else's before, what happened? You ended up right here, right? Don't think that the surgery is going to change that, folks. You cannot keep doing what you've always been doing, thinking the surgery is going to force your body to shed weight and keep it off. If you don't support it, it cannot do that. You have to do that by taking care of yourself. You really have to monitor this, whether you've ever struggled with it in the past or not, but especially if you know you have. And frankly, a lot of bariatric patients say that this has been the number one problem they've had with controlling their weight, that they gave all of their time and energy away to everybody else and they had nothing left for themselves. If you don't address this, those issues will just come back. So one way to cope with this, the guilt about taking care of yourself or the resistance to taking care of yourself, is to reframe that self-care from a want to a need. You don't just want to lose weight, you need to. You have to. Why is that? Just think about it for a bit. What will happen to your weight and your life if you don't? And in order for you to reach the goal of losing weight, you don't just want to take care of yourself, and frankly, you might not want to, but you have to. Because if you don't, what will happen with all of the rest of it? So one thing to consider is to write a letter to yourself. And this is hard to do. you got to really be honest with yourself about why you didn't take care of yourself before. And most importantly, what you're going to do different from now on and why you're going to do that. The next topic is also difficult for a lot of people. It's about your relationship with your body. How do you feel about your body? You might have a sense of how you feel about your body now, and a lot of folks feel like, or they are expecting that they will feel great about their body after they lose a lot of weight. I'm telling you, you need to be realistic about this. You need to have a realistic ideal outcome. There's an author named Sarah Knight, and she uses this term, she calls it a RIO. You have to have a RIO about your body. Now, I'm not saying to give up. I'm not saying to settle, but I'm saying be realistic so that you don't give up too early or torture yourself with unrealistic expectations. So going into this, spend a little time getting your head on straight about what % of excess weight you can realistically expect to lose with the kind of procedure that you are about to have. You know, I hope, that it's not 100%, right? It's more like a ballpark 60%. A little variability depending on the kind of procedure. And what is your expectation about excess skin? Now, we've got percentages based on experience of how much weight people can expect to lose with various procedures. We don't have any numbers about the % of excess skin, but that skin doesn't melt away with the underlying fat tissue. Are you prepared to live with that? You know, we all look at amazing before and after pictures where people look trim and tight and toned. But did you ever notice that none of those before and after pictures are ever of naked people? And I'm glad that they're not of naked people. But under those skinny pants is a lot of lumpy, bumpy, saggy skin. And frankly, it ain't pretty. I've worked with a lot of folks who were really expecting that they were going to come out of this looking like whatever icon of body perfection you might associate with. Somebody told me not long ago she thought she was going to end up looking like Britney Spears. Well, turns out that's not what ends up happening. So you have to accept imperfections. Now, again, I'm not saying give up. I'm saying be realistic. You have to be prepared that there are still going to be aspects about your body under your clothes that you might not prefer, that you might wish were different. But you have to accept those in order to prevent them from triggering you into unhealthy behaviors. People thought that they would love themselves just based on the number on the scale, but there is still the image in the mirror. And a lot of folks have a hard time loving that imperfect image in the mirror, no matter what the number on the scale says. When people start out with the wrong expectation that the body underneath those clothes will look the same as the body outside the clothes, they often develop severe disappointment or shame or even disgust or body dysmorphia, which is a mental health condition. And when that gets swept under the rug, eventually it eats away at the best intentions to get healthy and stay healthy. I mean, why would you go through all that trouble for the rest of your life for someone that you loathe, someone you find disgusting? So you have to learn to accept those imperfections and embrace the goal being a healthy lifestyle, not just the number on the scale or the tightness of your skin or your muscle tone. It's okay, it's good to keep working toward better health and fitness and happiness, of course. But if you can only be happy and at peace with perfection, I really encourage you to reach out and get some help on that ASAP. Don't wait to see what happens and then respond to it after it's become a big problem. It's much harder to get under control then, and you may have lost significant ground before you begin to deal with it. So think about that now. The next part is about your relationship with food. I have had people who tell me, I don't have issues with my relationship with food, but frankly, everybody has feelings about food and about their eating behavior. So I'm going to just give you a couple of exercises to work on this. Look at this picture of these people that looks like maybe they're out to dinner and they've got a lot of great stuff that they're enjoying. They got a nice bottle of wine. They got a nice basket of bread, lots of different things, right? When you look at a picture like this, don't you just want to fit in? Don't you want to join in with what everybody else is doing? But imagine you're sticking to your healthy foods and an appropriate bariatric portion size, which would be about less than a quarter of what these folks have on their plates. How would you feel just sitting there while everyone else is still eating and drinking? Just let yourself reflect on that for a few seconds. Imagine yourself at this table and let the feeling kind of sink in. Do you feel left out? Maybe resentful or embarrassed? There's nothing wrong with you if you do. The desire to fit in is a totally normal human experience. In fact, it's wise to fit in, generally. Think there's safety in numbers and danger in isolation. If you're the only zebra out on the Sahara and a lion comes looking for lunch, just guess who's going to get eaten? You, because you're the only one there. If there's a herd of other zebras around you, you're safer, right? But the truth is that sometimes you're going to be different in some ways. And after weight loss surgery, it's a pretty noticeable difference. The bariatric eating pattern, the bariatric lifestyle just really doesn't fit in with mainstream American culture. But you should keep going out with your friends anyway. It's okay to still go to restaurants. People are sometimes afraid of that. They think they're going to have to live the rest of their life without being able to enjoy those experiences. That's not true. You should still go out. Social isolation is not good for mental or physical health. So my recommendation to you is, if you find yourself in that situation, don't fixate on the difference. Don't fixate on feeling like you're the odd man out. You're the only one who's not still eating. You might feel a surge of those uncomfortable emotions. That's normal. Just don't let those emotions make decisions for you, because they may tempt you into just have another bite. You're not really all that full. You could probably have another bite. You want to have that. Just let yourself have one more bite. And over time, one more bite, become 10 more bites, become right back to the same problem with quantity or perhaps with food choices. If everybody else is ordering really rich, high calorie, high fat, lots of processed refined food, and you like that food too, you could easily slide back into that if your main motivation is just being like everybody else. So my recommendation is, remind yourself you are connected to these people in other ways. You're there to be with them, not really to be with the food. You could go and get that food all by yourself. The issue, but why are you not doing that? Why are you there with your group of friends or family or whoever it is? Because you're not there alone. The people are really the draw. Take a look at this table. Looks like maybe it's a Thanksgiving table. And just reflect on this for a minute. You've got an abundance of food. Not just enough, but an abundance. Plenty. More than you could ever eat. How do you feel looking at all of this stuff? Do you feel happy, safe, successful, secure? Many people do. And again, that's a normal thing. So now, envision the opposite. You got a big plate, big white plate with a very small amount of food. So if you compare these two, the food on the right, the plate on the right, seems scarce compared to the full plate on the left, or the cornucopia of the buffet we saw on the previous slide. So focus on your plate of food, your little quantity on the right, and the rest of that empty plate. How do you feel, especially if that's all you get? Everybody else has the plate on the left. You're just having this little bit on the right. How does that make you feel? How have you felt before when perhaps you've been on a diet and the quantities that it was telling you that you needed to eat were really small, but everybody else is indulging themselves in full size quantities. Sad, anxious, angry, resentful. Again, many people really do feel this way. Those emotional reactions to quantity can create an addiction to abundance. We feel rewarded when we have a lot of things. Not having enough of a resource triggers a negative reaction in people. We're wired to seek out abundance and avoid scarcity. And again, it's totally normal. There's nothing wrong with you. It's an evolutionary mechanism. If we can't ensure a consistent supply of resources, we can't survive. Our species can't survive. So this is hardwired into us. Those reactions come from a part of your nervous system that is trying to help you survive. It's primitive and it's unsophisticated and it's uninformed about how much you really need, but it's very natural. The thing is, you can't let that part of your brain make decisions for you, even though it will try to. You should expect that it's going to continue to try to talk you into having more. It's going to continue to spur feelings of, I wish I had more. You know that phrase, your eyes are bigger than your stomach? You're motivated to take more than you really realistically could even eat. Even though that's logical, the biological mechanism that underlies this has nothing to do with logical. In fact, it does not come from the logical part of the brain. It comes from the primitive survival part of the brain. So when you feel this reaction, and maybe you don't think you will, but I'm just saying, be aware, it certainly could happen, and it wouldn't surprise anybody if it did. It should not surprise you. If you feel the reaction, you really should acknowledge it. Don't just block it or try to stuff it down or pretend it's not there or tell yourself you're being silly or stupid or bad. Reassure yourself that you are okay, even though you're feeling uncomfortable and having a strong desire for more. Reassure yourself that this little quantity really is enough because you have a new anatomy and you have a new metabolism. And keeping those portion sizes small will enable your new metabolism to continue to help you maintain your weight and your health. Is that sometimes people have a relationship with certain foods. For some folks, it's not about quantity, it's about certain things, trigger foods. And so we're going to talk about why it is that we want to eat what we eat. So if you think about what role food has played for you, other than just survival, it may seem obvious, but it may be a little deeper than you thought. Not everybody thinks they have emotional hang-ups regarding food, and maybe you as an individual person don't have any awareness that a particular kind of food has any more influence over your behavior than any other kind of food. Maybe you just don't want to think that about yourself. But it's a very common phenomenon that many people share. There is a scientific aspect, for example, to comfort foods. Refined carbs and fat are called comfort foods for a reason. Both trigger a serotonin release when they hit the gut, just like the antidepressant Prozac does. That's what serotonin does for us. It helps us to regulate our emotions. And when we have enough serotonin in our system, we tend to be able to feel stable and content. Without enough serotonin, we're much more likely to feel depressed and or anxious. So if you think about it, about comfort foods and what they do, nobody ever makes a beeline for a salad bar or gets up and heads to the store to buy a nice head of romaine lettuce when they get stressed out. I mean, I've been a psychologist for 35 years. I've never heard people tell me that they do that. But they might get up and go get a dozen donuts, or they might order a pizza, or they might raid the cookie jar, or polish off that quart of ice cream in the freezer when they get stressed out. Not because these people are bad or weak or are moral failures. It is a biological reality that eating those foods produces this neurotransmitter effect in the body. High-fat, high-processed carb foods also trigger a dopamine response. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter that controls the craving process. It works like this. If you do something that makes you feel good, dopamine makes you want to keep doing that thing. I mean, who doesn't want to feel better? So when you eat high fat or highly processed refined carbohydrate food, serotonin gets released into your system and you feel that better. Voila, that worked. So your body says, well, let's keep doing that. That's a good way to feel better. People who feel better and who are stable are more likely to survive. Your body wants you to survive. It thinks it's helping you. So it makes you want to do that thing again and again and again. Your body creates the craving. Now, I'm not giving you a pass here. You still choose how you respond to those cravings. I am just saying it's not a moral failure. It is biologically driven. And since that is a scientific reality about the way bodies work, you have to stay on top of it, because having this surgery and losing a lot of weight is not going to protect you from experiencing stressful things in your life. It is a powerful tool, but it's not that powerful. Also, you may unwittingly trigger and reinforce those biological cravings by not being careful about those carbohydrates, especially highly processed refined carbohydrates, because they impact your insulin production, and that affects blood sugar, and that triggers a strong desire for these foods because they're an easy resource for energy in this whole neurotransmitter reaction. So whether it's emotional eating or habitual eating, you really have to keep an eye on this. Again, feeling like or expecting you can just eat whatever you want as long as it's not much of it is likely to trigger this process and create cravings that grow despite your best intention over time. These things escalate. So more about the relationship with certain foods. Some foods become triggers because they have a kind of symbolism. So again, if we're going to look at the picture, here's a little girl who looks like she's making a pie with her grandmother. So this little girl could grow up, and whenever she sees pie crust or she makes a pie or she eats pie, it makes her remember her grandma, who she probably really loved and who did all the grandmotherly things for her. So she can develop an emotional attachment to that kind of food. But very often, those just happen to be the same kind of foods you will likely have to really limit. And if you have to limit food that reminds you of a loved one, there could be resistance to that. So you need to find other ways to remind yourself of that person or that relationship. Maybe consider getting together some pictures, maybe make a scrapbook, or find some home movies or DVDs, or write yourself a story about that person or place or situation. And whenever you feel a longing for that, go read the story. Don't go have the pie. Go read the story and let the good feelings that the story or the photo album or the home movies, let those good feelings sink in. You still have the memory of those relationships. The food that you associate with them does not bring the person back. It just reminds you of them, and you don't need the food to remind you of them. So then when you do that, congratulate yourself on not using food as the bridge to that memory. And that self-congratulation is a big thing. The research on human behavior says people do what they get the most reinforcement for doing. So you want to increase the likelihood that you're going to find other ways to remember these important people in your life and decrease the likelihood that you'll use food as that bridge. So when you do the more healthy, more adaptive behavior, like getting out the scrapbook or reading the story, you really want to reinforce yourself for that, because then you will be more likely to keep doing that in the future. Sometimes for some people, there's actually a feeling of grief associated with this process. If you feel like you really, really miss the person and now you're limiting the food, that may trigger the same kind of grief that you felt in the loss of the relationship. And it may not be a person, it may be an event, or an activity. I always got together with people and we always made a million jillion Christmas cookies. And now I can't do that anymore because if I'm around those cookies, I can't control myself. So I have to let that go. And people really do feel like they have experienced grief when they feel like those things have gone away. So be careful, because that behavior may be auto-reinforcing. If I just let myself do it just this one time, then I'll feel better. And you will. The pain of the grief may temporarily go away, but then you're reinforcing the behavior because you feel better when you go back to the unhealthy behavior. You feel better biologically. You're more likely to do that again. The way your body feels when you've had that, and the relief of that anguish or the pain or the grief or the sadness, getting that to go away by eating high fat, high processed food can reinforce the behavior itself. Even if you're telling yourself, I feel bad doing that, I shouldn't have done it, the biological mechanism is a very, very powerful reinforcer. So now think about what other roles food has played for you. Sometimes people will say food has been a companion to them. I've had people tell me food never criticized me. It never didn't want to spend time with me. Food sometimes gives people a feeling of nurturance. It produces a sense of warmth in the body. Sometimes the texture of the food feels almost like getting a hug from someone. It can be a refuge. I feel safe when I'm eating. It can be entertainment or a source of like a creative outlet. Again, it can be a sensual experience. And I don't mean that in a creepy sexual way. I mean, there's a sensory aspect to food. It smells good. It feels good in your mouth. Did you ever eat something that you had burned or it had gotten dried out and you feel that funky, unpleasant texture in your mouth? You don't want to keep eating it, right? But if something feels good, whatever that is to you, I wanted the crispy, crunchy, salty, creamy, sweet sensation, and you get it, it meets a need for some sensory input. Maybe it's just simply familiar. I'm just used to eating this food. This is the kind of food I grew up eating, and I'm just used to it. And again, it's a way to belong. So if you've got to limit foods that have played these roles for you, it's really important to recognize these are things that you have needed, and you need to find another way to get those needs met. Because if you don't, the habitual behavior that has always worked before is going to slowly work its way back in. And human behavior is likely to revert to old patterns. Even though you told yourself you would not let that happen, this process is insidious. It is most often unconscious. It's very rarely ever an intentional backslide. People don't even realize it's happening, which is why I'm a very strong advocate for keeping a journal so that you have some accountability. Again, it's not that you could never have food that makes you feel good or that is fun to eat or was a creative outlet for you in cooking it or decorating it. I'm not saying you can never have those things, but you don't want to be doing those things frequently. You want to have other avenues of getting those needs met. And if you've got a journal that you keep, you can look back and see how often have you been doing this and catch yourself before it returns to being a habitual pattern. So all of this involves changing your relationship with food. And, it's more, I've mentioned that people sometimes feel a sense of grief, but it's actually more like a divorce than a funeral. And again, that's a phrase I took from Connie Stapleton, the other bariatric psychologist. You're not going to be rid of food forever, of course, and you're not going to be rid of trigger food forever. I mean, those things are not dead. You're going to see them around town and at family gatherings, just like maybe someone you used to have a relationship with. Other people will still rave about them, how much they like them, how much fun they had with them. They'll flaunt their relationships with those foods right in your face, not meaning to harm you. They probably have no idea that that might produce an emotional reaction in you. So again, you have to be prepared for that. So a recommendation is, I know this seems a little odd, but consider writing like a Dear John letter to food. Not a eulogy that you would give at a funeral when you're never going to see somebody again, but a letter that says, listen, we need to break up. Acknowledge in this letter how food has helped you, what it did for you. It nourished you, again, it made you feel good, etc. But also acknowledge how it hurt you, how it lured you, how it enabled you, how it made you feel bullied or victimized or like trapped into something that you didn't know how to get out of. Maybe it isolated you. So again, it wasn't the food that did things like isolate you, it was how you used the food. We're not abandoning responsibility here. You still have to take ownership of how you deal with food. But what you want to do now is to reestablish the nature of the relationship. You're going to set limits on it. What are you going to do when that food presents itself to you, and how are you going to interact with it? So you've got a clear plan, not just, well, I'll cross that bridge when I come to it, or I don't think that even applies to me. It's good to have a plan, even if you never need to use it. And I'm telling you, when I work with folks who need to get back on track, these are the things that they say they wish they had in place. The last piece of this is your relationship with stress. I'm borrowing this concept from Buddhism. I'm not a Buddhist, but one of what are called the Four Noble Truths is that suffering, or I like to use the term stress instead of suffering, it's inevitable. Stress is inevitable. It might be life stress, or it could be food stress, like cravings or grief over the changed relationship. Or it could be social eating stress. It could be body image stress. Or like I said, it could just be life stress, having nothing apparently to do with food. So you have to learn to accept and tolerate that distress without allowing it to trigger you into unhealthy behavior, like unhealthy emotional eating or not eating. Because when some people get stressed out, their stomach feels so upset, they feel nauseous. Sometimes people actually do vomit, or they get diarrhea, and they want to avoid that at all costs. So they tell themselves, I just can't eat anything. Emotional overeating or emotional undereating is a disaster for bariatric patients. So you have to learn to tolerate some distress without letting it affect your eating and health behavior. Not just eating behavior, but also, for example, your exercise. I'm too upset to go exercise today. I can't deal with it. Or I feel too much anxiety about something you've got to do, work stress or something. I can't take the time to exercise. Or I was so caught up in this stressful thing, I forgot all about my meal planning. That's fine. I'll just hit a drive-through. I just won't get anything unhealthy. So you have to learn to recognize it, and you have to learn to tolerate it so that it doesn't affect your healthy behavior. It's like a muscle that you can and you should strengthen. So don't wait until it happens and then try to keep it under control. It's like trying to put a bridle on an unbroken horse. That doesn't usually work very well. So the recommendation is to have an array, or like a menu, of different distress tolerance or emotion regulation tools that you can use when these things strike, and have a plan for that ahead of time. And I mean ahead of time, like now. Come up with a list of all the different things you possibly could do. Like do some deep diaphragmatic belly breathing. When you breathe in through your nose and let your lungs inflate so much that it pushes your belly out, because that presses on the vagus nerve that communicates to your brain that it is okay to calm down, and it can stop doing what it's going to do to your stomach and your intestines and your musculoskeletal system. And then count how many seconds that big inhale takes for you, and then extend your exhale, maintaining the pressure on your belly for twice as long as the inhale took. That will help you to calm down. And you might have to do that several times, but each one of these, for most people, is about 15 seconds. You can do that right in the moment. Once you get to a more neutral headspace where you feel like you've, gotten yourself off the ledge, then you can work on your thought process. Like, okay, it's okay. I don't have to react to this. I'm still safe. Let's just say maybe it's food stress. It's like a really strong craving. It's okay. I know what this is. This is just a chemical reaction that my body has learned this, but I don't have to give in to that. Maybe my blood sugar has dropped because I haven't really been watching what I've been eating today, and my brain is telling me I need to go eat some cookies or Doritos or something, but I don't need to do that. I need to balance my blood sugar, but in a healthy way. Or everything in me is screaming, just eat that ice cream. You know you'll feel better. I need to feel better. I don't need the ice cream. Now, recognize your brain might respond, but the ice cream will work because we talked about the serotonin response. Yes, it might work, but it's going to cause more problems than it's going to solve. I have a menu of other options other than the ice cream or whatever, other than avoiding the gym, other than, staying awake worrying all night. So if you have a menu of other options, you can say, well, yeah, that's true. There are alternatives. If you don't already have that list of alternatives, there's a very powerful driver to just give in to what has worked in the past if you don't have any options already written out. And then, of course, when you opt for these alternate strategies, give yourself a lot of reinforcement for that so that you are more likely to choose this healthier pattern again in the past. I know it might feel weird to be giving yourself pats on the back, but I'm telling you, this will impact your long-term behavior. And remember, you're doing this to try to change your life. So go ahead and let yourself change your life, even if it feels a little weird to learn these new strategies. Mindfulness meditation practice is also a really good way to build up your distress tolerance. So you do this not in reaction to stress, but just as a daily healthcare process, like brushing your teeth. So a lot of people think of meditation as a really long process. You got to sit there for, an hour or some long period of time, and you have to clear your mind. And neither of those things are true. Those are ways that some people meditate. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with those, but that's not the only way to meditate. Mindfulness meditation can be effective in very short bursts, like 10 minutes of just allowing yourself to be still and focus on some kind of anchor. A lot of times it'll be a guided meditation in an app that maybe you're listening to, and the narrator is giving you something to think about or to listen to from moment to moment. Or sometimes they'll tell you, or if you're just doing this on your own without a guided meditation, that the anchor could be just your breath. You've always got that with you. And so you focus on whatever you've chosen. Maybe it's some kind of nature sound recording or some music or something. And you just focus on that. Fully anticipate that it won't be very long until your mind wanders off the path and it's thinking about anything, everything other than that anchor. That's totally normal. That's what brains do. Just catch it and go, oops, I got off the track. Let me go back to my anchor. So you want to have the anchor identified ahead of time. The process of catching and bringing back to the anchor actually lays down new neural pathways between the logical, reasonable part of your brain and that primitive emotional part that I was talking about before. The more you practice this, the more of these pathways it lays down, and the easier it will be to catch yourself before you go on a deep dive into stress. So I've talked about a lot of stuff. It might really seem like this person in the graphic here, like just completely overwhelming. There is a lot to this. That's why even the surgeons will tell you that the psychological part is the hardest part of all of it. I'm telling you, you can do this. You really can. But you need to have a plan. So go back to that gotta do 'em behavior list in the beginning, that list of 6 things, not just the first 4 things, all 6, stress management and commitment to yourself included, and go through all of your thoughts and your emotions about all of those behaviors. Think about the logistical obstacles in your life. What were all of the obstacles? Every single one, anything. Whether it was a life issue or a thought process or an emotion that has gotten in your way in the past, and come up with a strategy, because what has happened in the past is the most likely thing to happen again. There's nothing about the surgery that's going to keep those obstacles from coming up, and willpower alone can't fix that for you, or you wouldn't be sitting here now about to get on an operating table and change your life forever. Don't trick yourself with a statement, I'm not going to let anything stop me. And I believe that you're not going to let anything stop you if you have a plan to actually keep those things from stopping you that have stopped you in the past. You can do this. It's hard. It's really hard. So investing a little time now, even if you feel like you don't have to do that or these things don't apply to you, is a wise course of action. People who do this kind of thing ahead of time are more likely to be able to stay on track and then prevent themselves from being part of the 67% who gain a lot of weight back and the 60% who end up with. Just in closing, no one can do this for you, but you do not have to do it alone, and you shouldn't. Like I said, you should have a good support group in your family and also outside your family. You can contact me at FryCare Behavioral Health. This is the number. Currently, if you're using your insurance, we can still do telehealth, but it doesn't have to be me. There are a lot of other counselors available that can help you through these things. Additionally, we have our own Facebook group. It's called SWL Sustainers, and it's a private group. It's closed. Be very wary of open Facebook groups because anybody can post anything they want to, and they're not moderated. And people post all kinds of crazy stuff when things are not moderated. So our Facebook page is closed only to our patients so that we know what they've been told. We know the rules that they're supposed to follow, and there's consistency. You won't have people saying, well, they told me I could eat anything I want. So there won't be confusion. You have to answer 2 questions to be allowed into this group. Who is your surgeon and who is the dietitian, or it might say who's the program coordinator. Either way, that's Becky Steele. Also, I do an in-person support group at the surgical weight loss office in that big open lobby the 3rd Thursday of every month. It's from 6 to 7 p.m. I'd like to do it a little later, but we run it right before we do the information session that you guys all watched online. So that's the time. But very often people stay afterwards and talk amongst themselves because they get a lot out of it. They really feel a lot of support and they want to stay and talk to each other and help each other. Sources, I mentioned Dr. Connie Stapleton. She's written some great books. One is Eat It Up, and that's the book. And there's also a companion workbook that takes you through some really, really important aspects to this whole bariatric process. She also has a really terrific free podcast called Bari Aftercare, and you can go to her website where she has lots and lots of resources that you can use. Obviously, there's a lot of other good bariatric books out there. There are cookbooks. If you're a person who says, I just don't know what to eat, some of them will have meal plans for you. Some of them give you a sense of what the portion size should be. If you're struggling with exercise, there are good books about that. Bariatric Fitness is also a really good book. Again, our PT, Pam, has done a really great presentation for you. But if you're struggling to figure out how to exercise and not hurt yourself, or how to modify it so that you can get enough out of it, even if you don't feel like you've got enough time to exercise for 30 minutes at a time, which you don't have to do. You can break those exercise periods up into smaller sections and still get the same amount of benefit to your body. So there's lots of resources out there for you if you're struggling to figure out how to do this. In closing, please feel free to reach out if you ever need any assistance. We're here to help you. So good luck. This can really be great. And I believe it can be, and it will be.